finding voices that would fairly picture it for us.
Nice. This is the loaded question. This is like
well, there's others, but you know, I figured you don't have a drink.
Well, well, for one, how do I? Well, the whole fact that when I started looking for Latino identities, gay subjectivities, people who were representative of who I was, and I didn't find that in the film, in any films. You know, I was exposed to this whole film industry that was very white, you know, and I couldn't identify with that culture because I grew up with different traditions. You know, I'm very family oriented, and these films were all about sex and not about family. These films were more about, you know, hooking up and not about, you know, cultura. You know, so how do I negotiate the fact that I had to make a people of color film and I had to like kind of set the tone? Is that what you're asking me, or?
Yeah, I mean, you know. Well, let's get this sort of question. How then do you, you know, what was your process in determining how you wanted to picture it and represent it?
Got it. Well, there's a lot of archetypes, a lot of different personalities, a lot of different kinds of gay Latinos from what I did, that I found in my research. So there's like the leather daddies, the guys that, you know, the muscle guys that wear leather, and you know, there's like the Latinos that go to West Hollywood that are a lot more assimilated and, you know, like whitewashed, you know, and they go and they dress in Abercrombie and Fitch, and you know, they go to West Hollywood and they don't know anything else other than just like this little compact area that's more, you know, white centric, and they're Latinos, you know. Hello. And then you have, you know, the immigrant, the cowboy, the guys that come, you know, straight from Mexico, and they have, you know, their machismo, and they have their girlfriends on the side, and they go to this club called Tempo, and you know, they drink like Coronas and you know, like rancheras, you know, like the cowboys, the guys are my uncles, like my tias married like these Mexican guys, you know. So you see these kinds of guys. Then you have like the Tea Party scene, more these like inner city urban individuals that are mostly black and Latinos that party in backyards and throw parties, and they get jumped in, and it's kind of like, it's pretty hood, you know, it's pretty gangster, and I was exposed to that. So I had to pick like certain people. I wanted to pick certain individuals, and I had 7 in mind, but that's too much for a movie. A film is only 3 usually, so if you watch any stories, it usually have 3 big characters, and so they told me to just cut it down to 3. So I have my Cholo from South Central, my Mexican American. You have your immigrant, undocumented immigrant from Jalisco, Mexico, and then you have a college Berkeley graduate Salvadoreño. So couldn't make it all Mexican, had to represent the Central American community, which is also very much found in Los Angeles. Like if I were to do New York, I would have probably had to do a Dominican, a Puerto Rican, and a Colombian. I'm Colombian Ecuadorian, by the way, representing.
Well, and I think that's an important point though to underline is you know, a character like Brian being Salvadoreño, having his Salvadoranness being very much a part of the narrative that you're presenting, and you know how few of those sort of depictions and representations there really are in U.S. queer Latino filmmaking at all. So
yeah, and they're like one thing that I told Brian, I'm like, you should have a series of Latino of Salvadorian films, and we could submit this to a Salvadorian film festival. He goes, what Salvadorian film festivals? He's like, they don't make films. I mean, you know, they have a history of a very traumatic history, and so there really aren't any. And they're coming out more and more, but yeah, just the way gay Latino films are coming out more, and this is probably one of the first, along with La Misión and Mosquita y Mari, you know, so films being produced about gay Latino identities by Latinos.
And why do you think that is happening right now? I mean, we can see certainly in my course we've looked at different examples from the 80s and 90s. 90s, of course, being fueled by queer new wave cinema. So, what are the sort of cultural politics that are happening now that are sort of permitting this type of filmmaking?
Well, to start, Obama got reelected, and he's all for the gays, for his queer community. So that's a start. Just the fact that you have a president that's acknowledging who we are for the first time in American history. You have a president who's acknowledging that we are here, that we exist, and that we deserve some sort of rights, that we deserve equal rights. So that's a start. Just things leading up to that are the fact that queer film has begun to emerge since the 1980s, even though it's been white, it's like, okay, queer Latinos are born here every day, and so now people like myself are like, okay, I need to see myself. So we're getting educated, we're being inspired by the American culture, which is becoming more open, and so we're seeking funds and we're doing things to make ourselves. The population increase of Latinos in the United States as well. I mean, Los Angeles is a majority of Latinos, so there has to be, I think, like more and more visibility now that we are realizing that we are invisible, that we haven't documented a history, and so I do that through new media, and I make an effort to make sure that we are seen in any way as possible through the vehicles that I know, which are like YouTube, Facebook, and now like this movie, hopefully making it. Well, actually, it's making it through to a lot of film festivals throughout the world, so that's pretty cool.
What? Well, and I'm interested in the point that you just brought up there around the depiction of the city in the film, and I was really captivated by the part where this Carlos was talking about the authentic LA, the authentico LA, and that it isn't as sort of schizophrenic as we would sort of think in terms of how it's been evaluating cultural geography, etc. So, and particularly in the very introduction of the film, your use of, sort of infographics and really sort of embedding these different montages so we kind of get a sense of the city space and the sort of place of queer Latino sexualities within it. Could you tell me a little bit more about your decision to use that sort of spatialized frame to kind of work through the city?
Absolutely. I mean, for one, Los Angeles geographically is extremely large, and people don't realize how big it is, so it was important for me to create a map to recognize and acknowledge that these guys are coming from all over walks of life, or not only that, walks of life, from different areas in Los Angeles, and every area is completely different. I mean, South Central has certain elements to it. West Hollywood has a certain element, so I chose Silver Lake in Hollywood because it has a large concentration of gay Latinos, and more actually are moving in because I'm like, oh, Oscar moved into Silver Lake, Fernando moved into Silver, so I'm like, oh my god, all these dudes are moving in there, so I was like, okay, I gotta pick somebody from Silver Lake, and then South Central. I know a lot of my friends are from South Central, so I just chose these spaces because I thought that they were very large or very important to depict the gay Latino identities. Or did that answer your question? Maybe not. Oh, and then on top of that, I wanted to make sure that I captured these individuals in different spaces throughout the city. So you see Long Beach in there. You're all over the place. I mean, and it's like you probably noticed that for those of you who know the city, where you're like, damn, like East LA, you're in downtown, so if you know the city, you're like, oh, I know that spot, so... Coachella. And that's actually not LA, but that's the surrounding city, but yeah.
Right, well, it's the new LA.
It's
the Inland Empire is the new queer Latino LA.
That's right, because you have Palm Springs, which is a very older white community, white community, and then you have Coachella. Is that what you're telling me? It's more Latino, gay?
Yeah, well,
cool.
we're out
I just learned something new.
Forget about it. All right. So we have about a little less than 15 minutes, around 15 minutes for question and answer. So I wanted to turn things over to you and hear what your reading was or response to the movie or to Jonathan.
Hi.
Jonathan Green.
Hello. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Jonathan. The arc.
Thank you. Terrific. The arc of the film basically follows these main characters who go from trying to find themselves to some kind of success to some extent at the end. How did you know? How did you pick these people to start with? When you began to follow them, were you following other people that you hoped would succeed as well? What happened if one of these guys didn't totally pan out as finding himself at the end?
Carlos was so hard to get a hold of sometimes. He would disappear and then he would reappear, and that's the very typical with someone who utilizes drugs, or very specifically like crystal meth, and so he would disappear 2 or 3 months at a time, and I was scared, and that I wouldn't be able to finish the story with him in it, and so I did have some issues with that, but going back to the very root of in the very beginning of how I found these individuals, for one, I would party with my friend Mondo, who's in the film, and Mondo knew Carlos, and so when Carlos told me his story about how his brother tried stabbing him when he came out, not tried, his brother stabbed him several times when he came out in front of his family, and just that whole story really moved me, and then I learned more and more about him, and I'm like, dude, you have to be in my movie. So that's the way I found Carlos, and I needed somebody like him, and nobody was really willing to do that, who came from the hood, who wasn't as worried about his homies finding out, even though Carlos really was scared about his gang and all of this, and some people were asking me if I was going to provide psychological help in case something happened or whatnot, because it's a risk. It's a risk about putting your life out there, putting yourself out there, because he actually, his family, as much as he's not a gangster, he still has affiliations because of his family. So anyhow, that's how I met Carlos. Alex, I was looking for a day labor worker to be a part of my film. What people don't know, and this is actually something extremely interesting to me, is that 50% of day labor workers in Los Angeles engage in male-for-male sex. And usually the typical scenario is, well, for one, these guys need money, and they're out there trying to work, and then a white gay man pulls up and offers them, hey, come cut my grass. Cuts the grass, and then he goes, I'll offer you an extra $50. Let me give you some sexual favors or whatever. And so what ends up happening is these guys bring HIV back home to their families, and it's a big epidemic. It's a big issue, and these guys are scared to get health care because they're scared that they're going to get deported, and so they don't get checked, and it's a really sad thing. And so for me, I called Bienestar. And actually, I went to the Day Labor Worker Union, and I asked if they could help. They didn't help. I asked this organization called Bienestar, who's featured in the film. They sent Alex out to go recruit for me to help me out. And Alex couldn't find anyone who was willing to. But he was so brave. He went out there. So he calls me. He goes, I was assigned to find someone for you, but I can't. But can I tell you my story? And Alex told me his story, and that's how he ended up in my film. I was like, all right, cool. I like your story. Let's put you in there. And with Brian, I sent a press release out to a whole bunch of people using social media, and Brian heard about it. His friend's like, hey, you should do this. You're good. You're a college graduate, whatever. So I had 5 guys, they all showed up to the interview at the same time, even though I had them 30 minutes apart. I had them in a round table, and one of them was a little catty, and, he just, started, saying things to Brian, well, at least and I was like, oh, for sure he's out.